Well, Kaiwen, thank you for joining us. This is the Retro Cave's first player interview. We wanted to do these back starting in 2019, 2020 at regionals with well-known retro players such as yourself. We just didn't get the chance to with COVID-19, so we're taking it online. I'm Colin Fisher. I'm from Minnesota here in the United States. I love to collect retro decks. Avery, if you want to introduce yourself.
All right, I'm Avery George. I'm from Massachusetts, and I've been playing since 2017. Doesn't feel like super long, but yeah. And we're looking forward to this interview. We're looking forward to getting some more retro in the spotlight.
Kaiwen, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Kaiwen Cabbabe. I'm from Melbourne, Australia, and I've been playing since the end of 2011. I played my first competitive season in 2012 to 13, and I've been to retro decks for a really long time, since the end of 2013. So my collection's been building pretty regularly and pretty consistently. So yeah, I feel like I know my way around, and it's really fun.
Awesome. So I guess I'll start off, so we met Kaiwen at 2019 Worlds. That was a great tournament, we didn't know it was going to be sort of a last hurrah before a long break in in-person events, but it was a great event. And you played Picarama, I remember. We actually were watching you in top 8 with your max rarity blinged out, Picarama. It was a good match. And, so I got to ask, so you played Henry Brand in top 8, and you also played Henry Brand in OCIC 2019.
Yep.
And you guys are probably two of the better known, if not best known, Australian players. So I wanted to ask you to start off, what's your relationship like with him? Are you guys more rivals, just, friends, competitors, a little of everything?
Yeah, so okay, so weirdly enough, Henry and I actually go back like quite far, because he went to the same school as me. So when I won Worlds in 2013, that was kind of like the time that he started getting into the game again. But he played a little bit before then too. But really ever since then, like I kind of went my own way, and then he went his own way, and then he came back into the game that year, and then ever since then, like we just found ourselves playing each other at really high level tournaments. Because we also played at that Worlds in the second last round of Swiss as well. So I beat him then, but then he beat me in top 8. So, damn. So we don't really, but like other than that, we don't really talk that much. More so rivals, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, and especially now we've both got a Worlds win as well. Yeah, so it's pretty. It's pretty cool though that like we kind of came from the same, place. If you know what I mean, like we both went to the same school. We played with each other at school, and then now we kind of had like pretty successful careers ever since we've left, so it's good.
For sure. Yeah, and you mentioned like 2013 was when you kind of started off competitively, and I think a lot of people who recognize your name, they probably recognize it from 2013 Worlds. Like you won as a senior. Anyone watching who doesn't know, this is your 2013 senior world champion. So Worlds is hard to win no matter what your division is, whether it's juniors, seniors, masters. And since then, you've done a lot, in the game. You've topped a lot of huge events. Do you still consider 2013 Worlds, that win, your greatest accomplishment in the game so far? Or is there something since then that you feel like you've done that's one-upped it?
Probably that and the top 4 at OCIC, because that tournament, like I hadn't played in big tournaments for a while because of school. So to come back and to be able to perform well like that at OCIC was pretty big for me. But yeah, like the Worlds win, obviously, like that's going to be like the most significant, because that, like any Worlds win is huge. So
how do you top winning Worlds, right?
Yeah, exactly. yeah And that really actually, and also like it was pretty significant in terms of alt format too, because I think after winning that Worlds was really when I started buying into like a lot of old decks as well. So it's a very happy memory for me for that too.
Cool. What with recent things happening in the world, of course, with COVID kind of putting a big pause on a lot of things, the tournament style how we play the game has changed completely. I think the fact that we're doing a Zoom call, obviously, with you being in Australia is one thing, but in general, we've been playing webcam games with old decks. We've been playing all these kind of tournaments online and stuff like that. What have you been doing to keep up with the game, with standard? Are you playing in any of the Players Cup things? And then as far as retro, are you doing any kind of webcam tournaments? Are you still able to do any kind of in-person retro? How are you keeping up with the game
Yeah,
still?
sure. Yeah. Okay. So to be honest, I haven't actually really been playing much standard at all. Just because so I'm doing medical, so I'm in medical school, so it's pretty hard for me to find the time to play online. Most of the time I'm kind of studying at the moment. So I try and keep up by talking to some close friends of mine. So Brent Tonneson and Christian Hasbani. You probably would have heard of them. They're pretty active online as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of like bounce ideas around whenever they have this cool idea and they just want to run it by me. They just talk to me about it. That's kind of how I'm keeping up with standard. But in terms of actually playing, I haven't really been doing that. In terms of retro decks, so I play, so like most of the retro games that I play, it's mainly with like friends, because we just find it really fun. And I play with a lot of old schoolmates that used to play the game that just want to revisit the formats that they used to play. And also I play with just a bunch of Australians through webcam. So pretty much all the top Australians like Jack Miller, Matt Burris, Aaron Vanderkolk, Christian as well. Like we just play through webcam and it's just really fun, like we can't travel and actually play with each other, but at least we can still do that. I know Aaron plays a lot of actual cam tournaments on a Discord server as well, and he preps with me a lot for those tournaments as well, which is really nice. So I feel like I'm also contributing to his tournaments too in that way.
You're the coach.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm the coach. Yeah,
It's been cool to see, especially recently. I know a lot of with all these retro tournaments and the RS to PK formats kind of really exploding. It's cool to see a lot of newer optimization, a lot of decks that are kind of adapting to like a new meta. Here we are, 15 years later in some cases, and there's like a new meta all of a sudden. It's cool. And the RSPK format exactly, especially has been something more new. I mean, I don't know, Colin and I aren't really super into that one yet, but it's been cool to see like a whole new format that never really existed, but just like a brand new old format, as funny as that sounds.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I'm not really into RSPK as much either, but yeah, it's been really cool to just like read on Snowpoint just all the different ideas and the way that like I guess new strategies can be implemented with like modern day ideologies of deck building on a lot of old formats, which is actually quite nice to see that like change.
Yeah, I mean, I think what makes RSPK so popular is, not only Jason Klaczynski popularizing it, but the fact that it allows for so many Pokemon and cards in particular, these obscure EXs and things to gain some spotlight that they never had in a format that existed in the US. But that being said, like, so I tend to gravitate toward certain formats, and RSPK, I will say I have taken, a deck I've seen in there and been like, okay, how can I make this not RSPK, but still use that same Pokemon? I don't know, like what kind of strategies have you been coming up with lately, on your own or in the past, like where it's like, this is my idea. This is something that hasn't really been thought of before, and I'm just working on it from scratch.
It's a good question, because a lot of the old format decks that I take from like 2004 to 2009 are generally ideas that have already been played, and then I'm mainly just thinking about like ways to make them better. Like for example, in like a lot of the actually, and also in 2011 is also another thing as well, like Majestic Dawn of Legends, which is my favorite format, by the way. So like with that format, like we tried a lot of things with like extra versus seekers and stuff in the list to make it I guess like less clunky with the way that you draw your like combo pieces. So because you have more options with like Junkar versus Seeker in that format, and we just felt like that wasn't really very explored before the format rotated. And just extra text that we can run in different lists and like tinkering with counts. But in terms of actually finding like a specific idea that I can call mine, I probably haven't found that in an old deck, because a lot of the ideas I just get from like Snowpoint and from just talking to people who used to play. So yeah,
A lot of these formats are kind of solved too, so it's hard to kind of come up with a completely unique idea that no one's ever thought of before, because usually those are bad.
For sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like they
that's
didn't get
another
played
thing,
for a reason.
Exactly. And also like a lot of the decks that I try and build, I try and make the matchups as even as possible, so that if like we do a round robin with like mates of mine, everyone feels like they have a decent chance. Obviously some matchups are going to be a bit more skewed because that's just the way things go, but yeah, that's generally how I try and tailor like a lot of the lists that I have. So yeah.
MD-COL, what have you found is like the best for, maybe not the best deck in the format, but best one for you? What's your favorite deck in the format?
It's definitely Clifton Go's Lux Trump deck. I actually think this is a bit of a plug for him, but he is like the best SP player in the world. I'm not even kidding. Like he is amazing. He taught me pretty much everything that I know about SP, and that I've been teaching everyone in Australia pretty much the same thing, because the format is so uniquely different to what the game is today. And I think a lot of old school players wish that the format was similar today to what it was during that time. And it even goes back to like the Holland engine, because we really like formats where we have cards that give us access to every card in the deck, which we think is really important because that increases your skill ceiling. But we don't like cards that allow you to have access to everything in the deck, but requires that access to be like mass draw. So for example, like we don't like Crobat and Dedenne existing in the same format with like Research, but we like cards like Cyrus's Conspiracy or like Celia's Network or Holland Transceiver is like an amazing card, because they give you access. Yeah, because they give you access to cards that give you more access to other cards in the deck, and it improves your micro decision making within the game. So but like unfortunately, like the way the card design is going has kind of gone today, those cards wouldn't be good. I mean, like we have cards like Skylar in current standard, but that card isn't played at all, because why would you play a card that loses you tempo when you can just play cards that mass draw cards, and you can probably see those combo pieces based on percentages anyway. So we think that having those micro decisions in those formats gives us a way to improve our skill, in addition to experiencing something that has never been experienced, well, that we can't experience right now in today's format. So that's why we really like it. And yeah, MD-COL has that element to it that we really enjoy. And also one more thing, there's also Power Spray that exists in that format, which we think is like a really, really important card.
Yeah.
We really like that card, because we think that having checks to, I mean, because like people can say, you know, back then Uxie existed, but there was a check to Uxie, and that makes it really significant. So that's why, you know, like we like the fact that things are checked in that format, so that nothing is insanely broken. So yeah,
I mean, as a former Yu-Gi-Oh player competitively, yeah, Power Spray is like the only, you know, Yu-Gi-Oh card to ever sneak into Pokemon TCG.
Yeah, it's a hand trap.
And without Uxie in format, I would say it was completely unnecessary. But yeah, that's a good point. With Uxie, you know, and you've got Claydol for the prior year, you know, so yeah, definitely
definitely good.
A necessary evil, we could call it.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you imagine a card like that
like
today too?
Yeah, I know, that would be amazing though, because like it adds that extra layer of like deception in the game as well, because you can bait people to like play out their hand or like give a false read. It's really, and the fact that it's searchable, like if it wasn't searchable with Cyrus, I think it would be pretty unhealthy because it would be random, but because it's searchable, there is a certain element of predictability to it, and that's really significant. So that card design is amazing. I just really like that. Like everything about that is really, really good. Like that's why we really enjoy playing that format. It's like awesome. And same thing with like Transceiver, because Transceiver gets from the discard and also from the deck as well. You can draw it, because like you can draw it when you have like at the start of the game or at the end of the game, or you can draw multiples of it. It doesn't actually matter. You don't really mind seeing that because it's always going to have a function. So I don't know. It just means that you brick less. And yeah, I don't know. I just think it's really cool. Like, yeah, card design, like, that's awesome.
And it's something that's healthy and something that's kind of missing from today's game. And I think, you know, when you're talking about cards like Power Spray, I think it really adds, like you were talking about, the almost the human element of being able to have a read on your opponent. Like you know, when I've been playing SP decks, I'll play a Cyrus already having a Power Spray in hand, and I won't take another one so that they don't know I have it. Or like, you know, you kind of like, you know, you kind of fake out your opponent like that. And it really puts this emphasis that's just totally missing from today's game, which kind of brings me to this question as well, that because all these old formats have so much more skill involved, because there's the nostalgia, how much of the recent boom in the interest in old decks, how much of that do you attribute to people just being tired of standard versus just the interest in it as a nostalgia factor? Do you think it's mostly just people being like, I hate standard, you know, did NA and Crobat and research and all this is just too much, and I want to play my Cyrus, but you know?
Well, okay, so I'm not sure about like the interest and everywhere else in the world, like the motivations of interest, if you get what I mean. But I can say from a local standpoint, Australia has never been the most active country in old format because it's really hard for us to get cards. So when standard was probably, I'm going to say standard probably hasn't gotten better, but like when it was at its worst, okay, which probably was last set and the set before, I noticed a lot of people kind of just getting sick of it, and they were inquiring more to the top players in Australia about how they could get into old formats and even just proxying decks to just see what it's like, because they've heard a lot of really great things about it online, and also from us as well. So I think that definitely plays a big factor to it. The other thing also is like obviously the lack of tournaments. Like if there were tournaments, I think people would just be forced to play standard no matter what. But the old format boom without tournaments, obviously there's more of a reason, more of an incentive to do it. Yeah, like that I think really is the big contributing factor. But yeah, like the standard, like people getting sick of standard was definitely a big thing here in Australia. Like that was significant because people just hated losing to Catcher Heads or Crobat into like bosses orders. I just hated that. So
yeah,
I think that it's not just like a burnout too. It's sort of, a lot of people, they point to, you know, power creep and just that ends up leading to a lack of diversity of decks when a few are able to dominate so much. And then some people, they kind of counter that by saying, well, if everything's really bad, then the game's not fun. And to that I say, you know, welcome to my first format ever, 2004.
Yeah.
Things were so bad. I mean, decks were quote good, but things were so bad that you could have an 11 card hand and no playable cards.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, I pulled that in 2004. Yeah.
But it was great because when everything's bad, then a lot of things that would be mediocre in any other format are playable. And I guess, you know, that's why I like that format so much. For example, do you think the game should shift more in that direction? You know, just, you know, lessening the power creep. I've even heard talks of TPCi considering just saying, okay, from now on, this is the only legal set starting now. We're just going to basically hit the reset button. You know, what do you think TPCi needs to do to sort of gain some of that retro, you know, magic back?
Yeah. So yeah, I've actually had this conversation with many people, and we kind of attribute it to a few factors. So the first thing is, if you look at the diversity of effects in today's current game, it's actually a lot less compared to what it used to be. So for example, you would have more unique attacks, more unique effects on cards back in those old formats, like in 2009, 10, and even going back to like 2004, compared to now, where everything is quite basic. Like look at Zacian, just one attack and you can't attack the next turn. But if you look at, for example, Blaziken FB level X, you have not only the ability to use the like the normal Blaziken FB's attack, but you can also use the level X, and then the ability adds like an additional layer to the attack as well on top of it. And there's like a risk versus reward factor for every single thing you play. But in today's current game, it's really simple, and they've dumbed it down to make it easy for new players to get into the game. But it's worse for us as older players because we want to see more unique effects come into the game to change the game, right? So that's definitely one thing. The second thing is it's a very tempo-based game because they have like whatever effects exists are very strong. So like Crobat, Dedenne, ADP's GX attack, they're very strong and they aim to just gain tempo. There is no check for any of those effects. So let's say if they had those effects, but they had checks for them like spray or ability lock or something like that, it would make the game a bit more bearable. There would be people that would still complain about it, but because there always is. But we think that it makes the game, yeah. But we think it makes the game a little bit more bearable. But in order for them, like we think, in order for TPCi to fix these issues, they need to basically make the game. They actually need to make the game harder. In terms of, they need to add more effects that do more to the game so that you can think more about your decisions. And then the second thing is they need to get rid of this idea that everything is tempo based and that you can spend turns setting up properly in order to have a good back and forth and kind of like an attrition throughout the game, which is what like 2004 existed. Like you can have like that 11 card dead hand, but you can still spend turns using Delcatty to just draw. And then like eventually you'll just explode, right? Like that's basically what it is. But yeah, exactly. But you can't do that. Like you spend 110 doing any of that in this format, and you just get like double boss's orders for the win. So you know, it just doesn't work. Yeah. So yeah. And then I think the other thing that we were also the other thing that we're also talking about is we also kind of noticed that coin flip effects are also like significantly worse in this current day and age because of the tempo nature of the game. It's like coin flip effects are not as significant in older formats just because you have more time to do things. So if you have more time to do things, those coin flip effects are going to stun you for the short term, but because you're playing a long game, it might not actually matter in the long term. But for our current format, like a catcher heads might actually just determine the game. Crushing hammerhead, same sort of thing, just because it's so tempo reliant on getting those resources at that particular moment. So I think that's also another factor that they need to look at. And they can reintroduce cards that they've printed before into the current format that facilitates it. For example, if they got rid of catcher, but they gave us power hand extension, that would be amazing. Or if they gave us cards that say, if you play this when you're losing, it doesn't affect. And then if you're winning, it has no effect. So if cards like, I mean, this might be a debatable topic, but Twins also is also a really good card. I really like that because it gives you that ability to come back. As I said, PAL, and like even like more unique effects like Swoop. Once again, like effects like that don't exist. And I think that would be really good in today's current game because it would add like additional layers of skill to what you could play. So yeah, that's just like my 2 cents on that issue. Yeah.
And you know, to add to that, like lock effects, I feel like they've been nerfing lock effects for the last, 3-4 years. Like we had Glaceon a few years back. We thought Glaceon GX, this is going to come in and create this whole new lock deck. And people realized, you know what? Nah, this actually isn't really that big of a deal because Zoroark just gets around it anyway. And we can just, we can work around it. And, I'm not saying they have to bring back straight up Garbodor to shut off everything no matter what, as long as it's got a tool on it. But, do you think conditional locking, affects, like, for example, a Soul Rock, Lunatone pair or something that's a little bit not necessarily difficult to get out because it just won't be played, but something that's a little bit more difficult than just having to slap a tool on a Garbodor, but actually locks things down. One more example, like Empoleon from the most recent set, it locks down basics. Well, if a lot of things are VMAX right now, do I really care? Probably not. So I don't know. What do you think? Does locking need to come back? If so, how much?
Yeah, so I think like when you mentioned that, like Lunatone Soul Rock was like the first thing that came into my mind. But I think the reason why that worked so well was because it was, once again, it was searchable by a card, it was searchable by Mentor, which was searchable by Transceiver, which means you had so many outs to it in the deck and you can get it at any point of the game. And the cards were also good because they had attacks that also did something even if you started with it anyway. And you also could remove those cards from the board because you had cards like Swoop and bench space for a lot of the decks that played them didn't really matter, and you just wanted them to like gain tempo towards the end of the game to win. So I think if they just slapped cards like that into the current format, it wouldn't do anything. They need to create a format where they add those cards, but then they also add tutorable ways to search them in addition. Because one of the things that we don't like is, and by we I mean I'm talking about like us Australians, like we don't like cards that have significant effects on the game but are unsearchable. So back to when I said like power spray, but an unsearchable power spray would be really unhealthy, but a searchable power spray would be great. So if locking effects came back, right, and in the same way as like Lunatone and Solrock or cards like Spray, or for example, I think that would be fine as long as they allow us to readily search the cards, and two, it has a significant amount of impact for the format that surpasses the tempo reliance of the current game. We're actually really good, like big fans of cards like Toad, contrary to what other people say. we also like see like we like Toad. We like Jolteon EX, like the one that locks in like 2017. We like Garbodor from like the Garbotoxin Garb, just because it gives you the ability to check what your opponents are doing. And there were always ways for your opponent to also check even that. So like there were cards like Tool Scrapper, Starly Megaphone to like check Garb. And Garb had its own initial like inherent problems as well, because you limited your own ceiling. So you couldn't play powerful cards like Shaman yourself. And we think that the risks versus benefits of playing a card like Garbodor is worthwhile in a format because it adds an element of skill that your opponent needs to overcome in order to beat you. And there were other cards that also facilitated Garbodor being really good. So for example, like N, which I think is an amazing card that should be put back into the game, because that allowed you to, that basically gave you like a win condition with a lock late game anyway. And I think whilst you'll hear a lot of people complain, we think that cards like that are actually good because they add an element of skill and attrition that doesn't exist now, because everything is unchecked now and it just feels so random. So
Yeah. So I think we're running a little bit low on time. So we want to get to actual, straight up just retro, no talking about standard anymore. Going back to when you were talking about, you started getting into retro and 2013 Worlds, would you consider 2013 itself to be a retro format now? What do you consider? I know we've seen a lot of discussion posts about this on Snowpoint, about what is a retro format? What do you consider to be a retro format?
Yeah. So I actually think up to 2012 is a retro format for me, because well, this is personally, I don't feel like 2013 is retro just because like it's still kind of fresh for me, to be honest. Like just to think back and I'm like, oh wow, I actually played during that format. That's crazy. So yeah, look, I can see people taking that as a retro format too, but for me personally, I think it's up to 2012. So yeah.
Well, it's interesting because and this kind of leads into my next question as well, but you mentioned that you played in 2013, so it doesn't quite feel like, it doesn't have the same effect as a retro format.
Yeah.
I think for me, I consider a lot of things to be retro formats. I think up until even 2014, but I also didn't play in those formats. Those are kind of the first ones that I watched people playing, and I didn't know how to play the game yet. And then I was like, oh, these are, by the time I got into it, I'm like, these are cool retro formats at this point. So for you and in your interest in retro formats, is it something more, is it about nostalgia? Is it about kind of recapturing the old magic of a format that maybe you wanted to play in or anything like that? Or is it just pure nostalgia?
Yeah. So a lot of it is pure nostalgia because like the way I started playing was my cousin used to play like back in 2006 and 7. And when he was teaching me how to play, he used to use his old Meta Knight deck to play against my theme deck that I'd buy, right? And like he would destroy me every time.
Seems
Right,
fair.
like it was not even close. Yeah, fair enough, right? And I would always ask him about his experiences playing in like 2006 and 7, and he would always tell me about these cool cards and all that. So I remember the Holland Engine from like him showing me all the cards. And then when I got into the game at the end of 2011, so I didn't actually play competitively, but this was just me and my mates. And we would watch the J-Wits on YouTube and like look at the top cut and stuff. And we would want to play the same cards that they were playing on camera, but we couldn't because we were poor, so we couldn't afford the cards. So, but like we would print out the cards and play, and to me that's like extremely nostalgic. So there's like a multiple layers to it. It's like there's like that nostalgia for like the really old like 06, 07 stuff, because I was actually introduced to that first. And then like firsthand for me actually researching the game and playing the game with my friends, that was really like 2011 and 12. And then everything in between was just my interest, because I wanted to see how the cards evolved from 2006 all the way to 2011. Because I remember seeing cards like Pokemon Collector, and then I remembered, oh, Holland Transceiver, you have to discard for that. Or like what happened? So I would go and search up to see like the progression of like cards, and that really piqued my interest. So then I don't know, and then just from there, like, you know how like it piques your interest, and then you see how cool the cards look, and you kind of research the formats, and you get introduced by people, and then things snowball from there, you know.
Oh, it's a huge snowball.
Yeah, before you know it, you have
Yeah,
15 decks in one format, and you're like, oh, what just
Yeah,
happened?
exactly.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I mean, and it's just cool having like I've tried so many times to have a binder collection. I know so many people who, you know, that's their thing. They love their binder. They've got, you know, every copy of X Pokemon ever made. But I just love playable collections, you know, being able to play your collection is pretty
Me too.
cool.
Yep.
And you know, another thing about that, about just the nostalgia versus, I don't know, just wanting to collect. And you know, you're talking about with, was it your cousin that, or your brother that introduced you to the hobby?
No, my cousin played. Yeah.
Yeah, your cousin. Yeah, so that was kind of me too, you know, where I was playing really casually from 2004 on, but then what made me get back into actually collecting it and taking it seriously, besides having the money to do so, was my cousins being like, hey man, you still play Pokemon, right? Like I've seen you talk about it sometimes. Do you want like all my old stuff? You know, and it's just like, boom, right there. Awesome. You see all the old cards, even the ones that are terrible, and you're like, oh man, this takes me back. Just, you can't beat that feeling. Can't beat it.
They just feel different, you know, they look different.
Yeah, they do. They do. The different borders, everything.
Yep.
From each distinct format too. Like each different border will take you instantly back to it's like a song, you know, where it takes you back to like a specific moment.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, I feel that nostalgia every time I pick up specifically Heart Gold or Silver cards, because I like they look so unique compared to all the other cards I've seen, and because as I said, like I got into it at the end of 2011, so that was like peak Heart Gold or Silver on format, just before Mewtwo X came out. So yeah, I remember going to buy packs from the local store and stuff, and like, yeah, now that I have it all in decks, it makes me smile every time I think about it. You know,
you got high expectations
really nice.
for Shining. What is it? Shining Diamond and Brilliant, or is it Brilliant Diamond? I can't remember.
I'm actually not sure myself. Yeah, I think it's Brilliant Diamond though. Yeah, that sounds like right. Yeah.
Who knows?
I think yeah, no, actually I have high expectations. Yeah, definitely, because Diamond and Pearl was a sick era. It was so cool. So I really hope they really live up to that with the remakes as well. Yeah.
It'd be cool to see what card designs we get from that too. Like if they do like a whole, you know, Diamond Pearl remake TCG set, you know, and try to bring back some of that nostalgia as well. So definitely running low on time here a little bit. So I wanted to get, I think, one more question in. You know, our main goal here in the Retro Cave is to kind of bring attention to the retro community, to bring more people in. What advice would you have for people trying to get into collecting retro, to building retro? You know, obviously going into Snowpoint and having a really good internet and claim sales is good, but you know, what's a good piece of advice you can say to getting into it? Maybe picking a format or something like that.
Right. Okay. So, this is actually kind kind of hard for me to say, but basically I think the best way to get into retro format is to not be afraid to ask people about it, because I think a lot of people like there's a barrier to a lot of people, like they, especially here in Australia, like when people were starting to get into it, I think people were really scared to message like other players to try and ask them and to bug them a bit about like old format. But the thing is, like, I love old format, so I don't really care if people message me about it, because I'm happy to like talk to anyone about it, right? So don't be scared to ask like any of the top players, because they're going to help you. Like, they're nice people, and any of the people who you know play, you know, message you, Colin, or message, you know, oh man, Jay is like another person that I know who like does a lot of old format content. Like, you can always like approach them. The second thing is make sure to read up on what's good, what's bad, what people's opinions are, especially from people who played during that time, because they can give the best they can give the best opinions. And then in terms of like building a collection, it's hard because the cards are a little bit expensive, but there are always other cheaper options. Like, you can buy Japanese cards or World Championship cards, just because it is expensive. But at the end of the day, because it's a retro format, like, the idea is to just have fun. So, you know, get that information and try and get as much knowledge from people that you know, and just, even if you have to print out stuff, just play, because that's the best way you're going to learn anyway. And you just like get those experiences, and you can make some great memories from that too. And you can also make some really good friends if you just message people about it. And I think that's what Pokemon's all about. So yeah, that's definitely what I would recommend. So if anyone's watching, if you want to get into old format, don't you can message me. It's actually okay. Like, don't be afraid. I'm always open.
Yeah, you're gonna have like 50 different messages in your your Facebook inbox now or something.
Good advice. Before we head out, I guess I want to give you a chance. If you've got any plugs, any shout outs you want to give out to the community, now's the time.
Sure. So yeah, just shout out to all of my friends here in Australia who play, just because I wouldn't actually have gotten more into old format except for them. So like Christian, Bran, Aaron Vanderkolk, so all the Australian guys, all my old mates as well who used to play from high school. And then also, yeah, just so if you guys want to get in contact with me, so my Twitter at Kaiwen Kwan01, and then on Facebook, Kaiwen Kwan. And yeah, I'm happy to take any questions or messages about old format. I just love to talk about it. So yeah,
Awesome.
Don't be afraid. Yeah.
Awesome. Kaiwen, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. We really appreciate it.
No worries.
You being busy with medical school. I can't imagine how hard that is. So good luck on your exams and everything too. And we were really hoping to have you on here again sometime. Hopefully when you're not, you know, under the stress of incoming exams, maybe we can even play.
Sure.
So,
yeah, 100%. Just hit me up for sure.
Perfect. All right. Yeah, thank you so much. Good luck.
Thanks. You too. Thanks.
Bye-bye.